All right, folks, we are going to start talking about Chapter 26, Section 1. This is basically where the Roaring Twenties come to a crashing halt, and we're going to enter into this time period in American history known as the Great Depression. So we're going to talk about a couple of things that you're seeing on the screen now. We're just going to jump right into it. Herbert Hoover was the president at the time when this is all going to kind of go down. Again, this is at the end of the Roaring Twenties, so the Roaring Twenties are coming to an end. And Herbert Hoover believed in this idea of laissez-faire economics. And the idea of laissez-faire, and we talked about this before, is that basically the government keeps their hands off the economy. So again, it's all about the government basically not getting involved. Let the economy be the economy, let the government be the government, and it's this idea of hands-off. Well, the problem is, at the end of the 1920s, there started to, problems started to develop in American society. And these people here were kind of saying like, hey, why don't you help? And Herbert Hoover, again, believed in this idea of, the government is not going to get involved. We're going to keep our hands off. And he really wasn't there to kind of prevent this massive implosion that we're going to see that happens. So what happened? Well, the Roaring Twenties started to bring about some problems. And one problem is by 1929, basically, by the end of the 1920s, believe it or not, 71% of Americans were making $2,500 a year or less. Now, what does that mean? Well, that means that 71% of the country was living below what's called the poverty level. If you live below the poverty level, you are considered to be, quote, poor. So that meant 71% of Americans were poor. Unemployment was going up by the end of the 1920s. Well, what was happening? Well, there was a lot of things that were kind of starting to happen. So what caused this depression? What sparked it? Where did it come from? And we're going to look at these four things: overproduction, buying on credit, speculation, and buying on margin. And these four all together, plus the event known as the stock market crash, okay, are going to cause this Great Depression. So it's kind of a bigger question to look at, but we're going to try to unpack these as we go through. So the first cause, number one cause of the Great Depression is something called overproduction. We've talked about this before. It's basically when you produce too many goods. Overproduction of goods leads to lower prices, and one of these reasons why there's overproduction is all these new technologies that came out, right? We got new ways of doing things, and production's increasing. So, we already got a sign that things are coming. Second cause of the Great Depression, something called installment buying or buying on credit, right? Credit cards, you guys may see those commercials on TV for Visa, MasterCard, Discover, American Express. These are all credit cards. And here, this guy down here, I don't know if you can read it, it says, "I will gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today." The idea is, if you give me the goods today, I'll pay it back later. So the idea is that you don't have to wait, to buy something until you have the money. You can buy it right now on credit using, today we call it credit cards, right? So you can buy something today and you can pay for it later. Well, one of the problems with this is that people started buying more stuff than they needed, right? Because it's easy to buy stuff when all you have to do is swipe a card. So people started to overspend, spending too much money. And what happens when you spend too much money is that you go into debt, okay? And then once you go into debt, the salary that you do make, once you get paid, guess what you have to do? You have to go and pay your bills, all right? And then you spend money and you go into debt, and then the salary you make, it goes, right? So it's this big vicious cycle. In fact, if we look at credit card debt today, this is in billions of dollars. Americans owe today about $400 billion worth of credit card debt, meaning American people have overspent so much that they owe more than $400 billion. Household debt. So look at this. This is very interesting. You see here on this chart, there's two graphs. One is showing you how much money the average household makes over time. And the second graph is showing you how much money the average household owes in credit card debt. So you can see the average household is making about this much money, but the average household is spending about this much money. And that is not a healthy issue. So credit card debt still to this day is a big, big problem. You can see all this difference between here and here. That's a lot of debt. So it's something we still struggle with even still to this day. Third cause of depression, right? This is cause number 3. Speculation. Speculation is a fancy word. Basically, it means buying or selling stocks in hopes to make a quick profit. You buy today, you sell tomorrow. It's not like a long investment. Some people buy and sell stocks as like an investment, right, to have for a long time. Well, this is an investment for a short time. Okay? Very quick. Buy and sell, buy and sell, buy and sell, buy and sell, buy and sell. And basically, during the Roaring '20s, the stock market is going crazy. Everyone's putting money in the stock market. Why? Because the stock market's doing this. It's going up, it's going up, it's going up, it's going up. So if I buy and sell, 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 you're going to make a lot of money. Well, what happens when the stock market starts to go kind of down? Well, then we're going to have a problem. So speculation we'll talk about a little bit more. Finally, one of the final causes, we'll call this cause number 4 of the Great Depression, is something called buying on margin. Buying on margin is when you go to this guy, the banker, right? Here's the banker, and he gives you money to invest. Okay, you borrow money and you take that money and you put it in the stock market. And basically you take that loan and you buy stock. You're hoping that the stock goes up. If the stock goes up, you can sell the stock, make money, give the banker back his money, and you'll be okay. Well, the problem is, what if the stock doesn't go up? What if the stock goes down? And you borrowed all this money and the stocks are going down. Well, that's what's going to be a big, big problem. One of the things that sparks it, the stock market crash, people are going to have borrowed money and things are going to kind of go haywire. I'll talk about this chart in class. So, massive, major event happens October 29th, one day after my birthday. October 20, not in 1929, 1983 actually. But anyway, October 29th, 1929. What happens is a famous event in American history known as Black Tuesday. Black Tuesday, the stock market goes haywire. There was a panic. The stock market started to go down. People started panicking and they started selling their stocks. And as people started to panic and sell their stocks, more people sold their stocks.
Please report to the main office.
All right, more people. Sorry about that. More people sold their stocks, and as more people sold their stocks, more started to sell, and then more people sold. Sell, sell, sell. And that made the whole market basically crash. Here it is right here. Sorry about this. Let me get rid of that. Anyway, here it is right here. You see the amount of growth here, 1927, 1928, 1929, 1930. Right, look how the stock market's going nuts. And then all of a sudden, kaboom. Right, that's called the stock market crash. It was Black Tuesday. And then the rest is history. You see this long, long, long problem of the onset of this Great Depression. What's very interesting is if you look at the stock market crash back then, all right, you see this guy right here standing outside the U.S. Stock Exchange, in New York Stock Exchange, saying basically $100 will buy this car. I must have cash, lost everything in the stock market. This guy literally is trying to sell his fancy schmancy car because he has no money. People literally went bankrupt. No money, gone.
Ms. McSherry, can you please dial 327?
Sorry about that. So, whoa, I didn't mean to do that. So, I think we're still recording. Did I lose you guys? I think we didn't. I'm trying to pause it so you don't hear that stuff, and I apologize. We only have about 5 minutes left. Hang with me. So, banks start to get what's called the bank run. People run to the banks because they have to pay back the money they borrowed. So where people put their money, like their savings, okay, they go back to get all their money that they put away for their whole lives. They say, give me my money, give me my money, give me my money. Well, guess what? When they get to the bank, there's a line at the bank. Everybody's saying, give me my money. And the banks run out of money. Okay? The banks go bankrupt. In fact, 9,000 banks across the United States go bankrupt. That's about 1 out of every 4. Yikes, this is not good. All right, you go to the bank, this guy right here goes to this bank, and guess what? His money is gone. This is not a good thing. People are here, I want my money, and the banks run out of money. Literally, people lose everything. Once the banks fail, now businesses start to fail. People aren't buying any goods. Businesses start to go bankrupt. What about those workers? The workers no longer have jobs. This is bad. Okay? Unemployment and hunger ripped through the country. 25% of the United States of America does not have a job. Unemployed, not making money. There is poverty, there is homelessness, there is hunger. In fact, if you look at the unemployment rates currently, this shows you from 2007 to about 2010 during our current recession that we're in versus the Great Recession, the Great Depression. You can see here, how steep this unemployment rate was. Again, we at the height of our recession, we were about like 9%, I believe, closer to 10% almost unemployment. Again, Great Depression, look over here, almost about 30%. I mean, that's a lot worse than the 10% that we hit. So we're not quite there yet, but it's interesting to see the correlation. So again, Americans are poor, Americans are hungry. I love this advertisement because it says the world's highest standard of living, right, during the Roaring '20s. There's no way like the American way. It's a big billboard, a big advertisement, the families in the car, and now look, you have all these poor people lining up in front of it. Literally people sleeping with newspapers, poor, hungry, starving. Look at this line, just trying to get free cup of coffee and a free donut for the unemployed. People are literally struggling to survive. Again, more lines for people trying to get free food, because if you don't get the free food, you won't eat. Right? This is what America looked like during the Great Depression. It was a very, very hard time. So what did Herbert Hoover, our president, do? It was kind of tough. He believed in something called rugged individualism. He said, suck it up, Americans. Guess what? You can't rely on the government to fix your problems. People wanted what's called federal relief. People wanted money. People wanted food. But guess what? Herbert Hoover said, not going to happen. You're not getting money from the government. You're not going to get food for the government. No, 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 no. And what he believed is that if the government gives money and food, then citizens will rely and become dependent on the government to fix their problems. All right? People started to not like Herbert Hoover so much. Even you can look at this banner. If you like the Depression and you want more, vote for Hoover. Oh boy, this is not looking good for Herbert Hoover. Herbert Hoover believed that private charities should help. Okay? Not the government. Private charities. Donations, churches, Salvation Army, religious groups. You give the food. You give the money. You give the shelter. You give the jobs. Not the government. Problem is, you're talking about a quarter of the American country needs help. The demand's too high. These church groups can't do that. Okay? So Herbert Hoover basically is now blamed for the Great Depression. People are poor. You see this guy turning his empty pockets inside out. These empty pockets became known as Hoover flags. All right, for anyone who was poor, they called it a Hoover flag. These towns where all these poor people lived became known as Hoovervilles. So Herbert Hoover's not looking too good. He decides at the last minute, you know what, maybe I should get hands-on. That whole laissez-faire thing might not be working. So he tries to help these people in these Hoovervilles, and here you see pictures of Hoovervilles and the poor, and we'll talk more about this in class. So Herbert Hoover says, I have to do something. So he says, let's get hands-on now. And here's his idea of hands-on. Here's what he says. Let's do some public works projects. These are government-funded projects. Basically, the government is going to pay money to put these guys to work. All right, and it's basically giving them jobs like building roads and dams and airports and bridges and tunnels. The Valhalla Dam was a public works project. Okay, this was money that was given by the government to build this dam. Okay, so the problem is, yeah, this is a great idea. You're helping the country by building roads and airports and bridges. You're helping put people to work. Problem is, it came too late. Okay, it was too late. Everybody hated Woodrow Wilson. One example of a public work project was the Hoover Dam, right? Get it? You guys ever heard of this one in Nevada? It's out by Las Vegas. It's called the Hoover Dam because it was under Hoover's administration that this dam was built. Okay, Hoover Dam's a very massive structure today. Public works projects today, guys, the Tappan Zee Bridge is going to be a new public works project to build a new bridge. We have wind turbines that are public works projects, new sewage treatment plants. There's a lot of stuff going on today. We're going to talk about the bonus army in class because I'm running out of time.